Hey everybody, Jake here from Bearded Gear, and I have an exciting video to shoot for you right now. This is going to be all of the contents of the Cut Club box. So in the Cut Club box, there are 20 different Spyderco models, all of which have been curated and selected by Cutlery Shoppe, by Jason and Thomas from the Millie PM2 Para3 Club, and have been presented in one glorious package. The idea behind the Cut Club essentially is to allow people the opportunity to handle a bunch of models from Spyderco. You can put them in your pocket. Jason was messaging with me today. He even said I could carry them around. I could lightly cut with them as long as I'm not damaging the factory edge. I'm not rope cut testing or anything like that. But they're designed, or this program rather, is designed to allow people to have the opportunity to basically test drive a whole bunch of models from Spyderco. Many of us, myself included, even me, who buys so many Spydercos, we are going to find quite a few knives in this box that we haven't experienced yet. And so the idea is to give you an opportunity to find out which of these models you feel like you need to have, and which ones you can know that for yourself you need to pass on based on actual experience, instead of just looking at pictures of them and videos on the internet. So I think this is a really, really cool program, and I'm just going to start going through the knives one by one. This is the first knife in the box, and it is the Chaparral. I happen to own a Chaparral. This one feels exactly like my Chaparral. So there is nothing revolutionary here happening for me. I already know that I adore the Chaparral. So the Chaparral is knife number one. Knife number two is going to be this guy. This is the Native Chief. And I have actually never even handled the Native Chief until I opened the Cut Club box. This is one knife that for me, I hadn't experienced. And I've grown to adore my Native 5 S90V carbon fiber. It is a fantastic knife. And so it's made me a little bit curious from time to time about the Native Chief. It's basically a Native 5, but stretched out and gigantic. This is a really big knife, especially for a backlock. I feel like I don't see many really big backlocks, maybe from Cold Steel or something, but not from Spyderco. And it's really, really well done. I like this knife more than I thought I was going to, frankly. As you know, if you've watched many of my channels, I am not a fan of backlocks. They're just probably my least favorite lock type, because I like to fidget with knives and I just don't find them enjoyable to use. I'm not knocking in any way their reliability or their functional ability. I don't prefer them. So it's fun that I get to see this one. Now I kind of know if they were to do this knife in a fluted carbon fiber S90V variant like I have on my Native 5, I might need to jump on one, because it feels a lot like my Native 5, just a little bit toned down because it's G10 and it's not milled and it's S30V, but still, excellent knife. Next we have, this is the Endura, right? Spyderco Endura, yes. It's a good thing it says on there, because I would have called it an Endura. Anyway, this one's in VG10. It's a Seki City, Japan Spyderco. I just got my first Japanese Spyderco, being my Salt 2 Wharncliffe, and I really like the kind of Delica shape. It's been a very good knife for me. I don't feel a need to have a bunch of Delicas, and now after holding this one, even the need to get an Endura or an Endura or anything beyond the one that I have. These kind of FRN lockbacks, they're not really my favorite, but it's a nice knife. I'm not knocking it. It's just not my preference. So another one that I'm glad I get to check out and kind of fidget with and feel around and not spend my own money to figure out whether I like it or not. Next we have one of my personal favorites in the box, because it's another one that I own. This is the Native 5 fluted carbon fiber S90V. In my opinion, it is the Native 5 to end all Native 5s. It's just such a fantastic knife all around. As mentioned, I do not like backlocks. You're going to hear that a lot in this box because there's quite a few backlocks in here. But this is a knife that I said in my review, It is so good in every way other than the lock type that I can forgive the lock type. If this knife was a frame lock or a liner lock or a compression lock or something else, I would like it even more. But even with it being this lock type, I adore this knife. It is just a fantastic expression of what can be done with carbon fiber. It's lightweight, it carries phenomenally well. I've got a deep carry clip on mine, but it's an excellent knife. Next we have one that I once owned, but no longer do. So this is going to be cool. I'm going to get to do a full review on this knife finally, even though I haven't owned one for a long time, because I did own one. I know exactly what it's like to own one and cut with one, and now I have one that I can use for review. That was a terrible Spidey flick, wasn't it? I'm not used to this whole tabletop thing, but for this video I feel like it makes the most sense. Anyway, the Drunken is one of the just most well executed Spydercos I think that has ever existed. It has extensive internal milling in a really cool way. There's no way I'm going to be able to show you on the camera where it is, but you've essentially got a titanium frame lock on this side with this milled kind of Drunken pattern that I think is a Sinkovich pattern. It's a Sinkovich design. I'm pretty sure that's his milling pattern as well. And that milling pattern that gives this titanium this awesome texture over here is mirrored on this carbon fiber. So we have two drastically different materials that have been cut identically, which can't be that easy to accomplish. I can't imagine it would be. We've got their awesome kind of mirror stonewash finished blade that has this kind of hazy mirrored finish to it. I really like it. It's S90V, carbon fiber, titanium. The downfall of this knife, as many have already stated, and as I will add in my review, is the pocket clip. It's just a bad pocket clip in my opinion, but everything else about this knife is fantastic. So there's going to be a full review to come on this one. I quite like the Drunken, regardless of the pocket clip kind of sucking. It's a really cool knife. I was really tempted to keep mine, but the way that I experience knives often requires me selling knives that I like to try other knives that I might like. Next we have a kind of a staple in Spyderco's lineup, not just the Para3, but this is the Para3 Lightweight, which does really well for Spyderco these days. They sell a lot of these. I actually just ordered one of these as a birthday gift for a close friend, and that's coming soon from River's Edge Cutlery, but this is one that I actually owned at one point, and I just never fell in love with it because I found I prefer my regular Para3. I don't find that the weight savings or the lightness of this knife makes it any more appealing to me than my regular Para3, although there are some inherent advantages here. We've got a wire deep carry clip, which is better than the factory clip and is placed as an actual deep carry clip. Why can't they just put the lanyard hole right there on the regular one like they do here and make it everyone's lives better? Anyways, this is great. I like the Para3 Lightweight. I just don't like it as much as I like my regular Para3. I'll probably get another one at some point because I did like it and it has some advantages. There are some things I like better. It's not that I never carried it. So maybe I'll end up with another one if there's a fun sprint or exclusive somewhere down the line. Now, next we have one that I had to look up the name of. I was pretty sure I was right. Actually, I should have just looked on the scale. It says it there. I keep forgetting on these FRN ones that they put it there. But this is the Stretch 2. This one particularly is in ZDP 189. ZDP 189 is a steel I've actually never even owned, which is funny. Spyderco uses it quite a bit, but from their Japan factory, which I just got my first one of, and it's Assault, so it's an H1. Anyway, this is a really cool knife. As the Seki City knives go, I kind of dig this one. I don't think I'm going to own one, because again, backlock and FRN, but I like the ergos on this guy. It feels a little bit bigger and more robust than any of the other knives that I've handled from there. Like even just the way that the liners are set in, it has not like a heaviness to it, but the weight feels kind of substantial. And I don't know, it's a cool, interesting offering from them. One that I had never even considered at all. And I find myself like, oh, I have a lot of respect for this model now. I get why there's some people who stand by it. Next we have the thinnest knife of the bunch, probably the smallest overall. This is the Chaparral. And the Chaparral is a knife that I have seen in photos quite a few times. They've done some really cool scale options on these, from carbon fiber to like Raffir Noble. I don't know if I'm even saying that right. They've done a lot of interesting variants of this knife, and so I've been tempted on a couple of occasions to get them, but again, backlog, so I haven't. But now that I have one in hand, I had never held one before. This, if there's a FRN lockback knife in this case that I am seriously considering purchasing, it's one of these, because all the reasons that have made me love carrying my Native 5, it's so thin and so light, and I just, as a secondary, this would make so much sense to me. I'll have to get over that I can't fidget with it, but maybe if I find the right kind of cool variant of this knife, I'll jump on one, because now that I've handled one, I mean, this is just insanely thin blade stock, like really, really thin, and it's stupid sharp, of course. It's paper thin behind the edge. It's a really cool little knife. So this is one that's intriguing to me, for sure. Next we have a knife that I've already reviewed, but I don't own. I borrowed my brother's to review. This is the Spidey Chef. The Spidey Chef is a really cool model. A lot of people just adore the Spidey Chef, and for good reason. It's LC200N blade steel with titanium scales, and it's very corrosion resistant in all of its construction. And on top of that, it's ergonomically, for me, really, really good. I like this knife in hand quite a bit. I like the way that my grip relates to where it places the edge. It just, functionally speaking, this knife is a joy to use in my experience. And you can watch my full review if you want to see more thoughts on this one. But every time I handle a Spidey Chef, I wonder why I don't own one myself, because I think it's a knife that would be at home in my collection. Next we have a knife that I've actually currently got one in my possession on loan from Lefty EDC, but this is the Watu. And I'm about ready to do my full review on his and send it back to him. But this is an interesting offering. It's one of the Taichung Taiwan Spydercos, CPM20 CV, with the G10 that has a layer of carbon fiber stacked on top of it. Deep carry wire clip that goes all the way to the butt. It's an interesting ethnic series knife. It is a smaller version of the chokeway, which already exists, and it's a different lock type. So there's some differences here, but it's the same silhouette, just shrunk down. Really interesting knife. I keep finding myself really torn on this model, but this is a cool one that I think it makes a ton of sense that this one's in the box, because people should be checking out the Watu if they're hesitant about it, because I think people will fall in love with it. Anyway, this is the Sage 5 Lightweight. So I've owned a Sage 5. I haven't owned a Sage 5 Lightweight. This is a Taichung Taiwan Spyderco, and it's interesting because it's very similar to the Para3 in terms of its dimensions, its cutting edge, its weight even, and so I've kind of almost seen two camps. I would say the commanding, the larger group is comprised of Para3 fans, but I see some Sage 5 fans out there who just keep shouting that they think the Sage 5 is a better knife. Personally, on the regular versions, I prefer the Para3, especially considering all of the sprint runs and the higher end production versions, like mine is in Maximet. These only come in S30V, whether they're the regular Sage 5 or the lightweight. As far as I know, that's the only steel that they've offered on either. But it's a really cool knife. It's done very well, and I don't know. Every time I play with one, I like it. The one I owned, I enjoyed, and so it's interesting. I find myself every now and then thinking maybe I should give it another shot, because ergonomically it's great. It's just so similar to the Para3 that it's kind of hard for me to justify having both, I guess. But this is good too, because in this box there's a Para3 lightweight and a Sage 5 lightweight, so people can literally compare side by side and see, hey, which of these makes more sense for me. And as you can see, they're quite similar, dimensionally speaking. But yeah, I think that's great that people can literally compare knives like this with this box and the way it's set up. Next we have the Techno 2. The Techno 2 is an interesting knife from Spyderco. If you've watched my Techno 1 review, you'll know that I didn't like that knife at all. I didn't like the design, I didn't like the ergos, I didn't like the action, I didn't like so much about it. I hated how thick behind the edge it was. This doesn't feel quite as thick, although it's still stupid thick behind the edge, if I'm being honest. I don't know. I'm intrigued to check this one out because I've heard so many people say that the Techno 2 is vastly better than the Techno, and I will say right off the bat, as soon as I put this knife in my hand, these ergos are a big improvement over the Techno 1. For my hands, it's night and day. This feels so much better in hand. It feels way more controllable where the edge is. All of it feels more comfortable, much better. Next, the action on this one, I can actually, oh, that's embarrassing. I can somewhat reliably, oh, apparently not. I thought I could. I can't Spidey flick it that well. But it's better slightly than the Techno 1 was. Come on. Oh, goodness. Yeah, it's just, I Spidey flick knives like crazy. So for me to struggle with one, I feel like is a testament to how difficult it actually is. But anyway, CTS XHP titanium frame lock. It's a sliz, swish, however you say it, design, which I think is frankly why there's popularity behind it. I don't know. These knives aren't particularly for me, but maybe you find them quirky and fun. So it is what it is, right? This one's in there. Next we have, oh, it's a little stuck. This one's super wide. This is the Jimbo 2. I happen to own a Jimbo 2, and I love my Jimbo 2. It is the Spyderco in my collection that, as of this point, I've actually owned for the longest. It's not my first Spyderco I ever bought, but it's the longest owned one in my collection. And mine is wearing aftermarket scales. I've heat anodized the hardware. It's wearing a deep carry clip. And so it's interesting for me to feel this one, which is bone stock. It's just the only difference between this one and the one that I have, the way it originally came to me, is that this one has a black blade and black hardware. But this G10 is the same as mine was. These ergos feel different with these scales. It's tempting me to put my factory scales back on mine because I really like these factory scales on the Jimbo 2. They're great scales for the nature of this knife too, and the way they're shaped. I don't know, I really, really like these scales. But anyway, this one is the all blacked out DLC coated version of the Jimbo 2. I've got a full review of the Jimbo 2 up if you want to watch that, but it's fun to see one that's a different color than mine and is kind of back to stock because I've gotten so used to having mine that's all modded. Next we have one of my favorite models in the Spyderco lineup, the Shaman. This is, pardon me, this is the basic plain Jane Shaman S30V blade steel. It's this kind of stone-washed finish, and then we've got black G10, stone-washed standard clip. It's a compression lock, as you probably well know, and this one has a stiffer detent than mine, for sure. I don't know if it's just the way that mine is tuned from, mine's a Tree Rex Shaman, and I've put aftermarket scales on it. Anyway, I had this exact Shaman for a long time before I got my current Shaman, and the only reason I sold this one is because I started to notice how many sprints and exclusives were coming out, and I like to get sprints or exclusives and get way better steels and just more exciting configurations for not much more money than these cost. That's the way my brain functions, but it's cool to kind of hold this knife again and feel it because it feels so familiar to the one that I had and carried and used quite a bit. So the Shaman is one that I know I've heard a lot of people ask about because they see some hype behind it, but I think there's quite a few like Spyderco guys who haven't tried one. So again, another one that definitely deserves to be in the box. This is the Manix II lightweight, and this one particularly is the kind of blue plastic that's a little bit see-through. I don't know what they call their, if it's plastic or FRN or glass-filled nylon or what. Anyways, this one functions with the ball bearing lock, just like the regular kind of G10 version does. These lightweight ones are linerless, which is really cool. It is truly very lightweight compared to what I remember of the only Manix that I've ever owned. And it's got the wire pocket clip, which interestingly enough, I'm just noticing this for the first time. I have a Spyderco Pakal right now, and it's the only Spyderco I've ever owned or recall seeing that has a wire pocket clip that's not deep carry, but this one also has a wire pocket clip that's not deep carry. So that's interesting. I didn't know that Spyderco was doing that on multiple models. I thought that was just on the Pakal. Anyways, the Manix II is a knife that I've always wanted to love because there's so much love behind the model and there's so much about it on paper that I adore, but the ergos just aren't quite right for me. The way that this hump is cut, it just doesn't quite work for me like a PM2 does or like my Shaman does. And so the one that I owned, that's the reason why I got rid of it, and I've never picked up another one since. I'm tempted to get another one, and I've seen there's one company, I believe they're called Caveman Scales, that's doing a scale replacement that I think actually replaces the liners as well. It's like a aluminum scale set that reprofiles the handle. It gets rid of that hump altogether. So I'm really tempted to give those a shot and pick a nice Manix in a steel that I really like and see how it does for me with those scales on it. But then I've got to buy a donor knife for the blade, and I've got to buy the scales, and it's not going to be that cheap, I think, if I ultimately want to do that project. So we'll see if it happens, but maybe. Next, we have a Lil Native. But this one is different from the only Lil Native I've ever experienced. This one is a backlock. And it's funny, when I pulled this knife out of the box, I didn't even notice that at first because my brother had a Lil Native and I've borrowed it and used it quite a bit. And I expected it to Spidey flick because I'm so used to playing with the one that he had. But it doesn't because it's a backlock. Womp, womp, womp. That's how I feel about backlocks. But anyway, if you like backlocks, then this is a cool one. The Lil Native is a really, I find, useful tiny knife. The way that you're able to get a full 4-finger grip on it and get so much control over this awesome little blade, I don't know, it's just a really cool, almost utility knife. And I find the Lil Native very fun. In my opinion, I recommend getting the compression lock one just because I vastly prefer it. I find it's actually a really fun little knife to play with in addition to it being very useful. But this one is definitely more solid in its construction, being a backlock. So whatever your lock preference is, I guess there is a Lil Native for you. All right, this is another Spyderco that I have owned and don't currently own. This is the Smock, and this is the S30V1. There's only been one exclusive of these that I'm aware of at all. It was from Knife Joy, and it was in 20 CV, and they did like a polished black G10. I hope that there will be more sprint runs and exclusives of these. I imagine there will be, because the Smock does really well for Spyderco. It's obviously a collaboration with Smock Knives, and it's a really fun knife. The one that I had, the second I pulled it out of the box, I removed the secondary detent because there's an extra detent in here that's kind of spring-loaded that's designed to just put friction on the blade this whole way that it's traveling. And I think part of that is to keep it from shaking out, which frankly mine would if I gave it a little shake. But this knife and how fidgety it was with this button lock, when I removed that secondary detent, it was just night and day compared to this one. So it's kind of funny holding this one and just feeling the difference here between what I remember of mine. I think if there's an exciting exclusive or sprint of the Smock, I'll probably pick up another one. And again, I will remove that secondary detent real quick and kind of make it my own because I think it's a better knife without that feature installed. Anyway, these are really cool. You can throw a deep carry clip on it and then it carries really well. The ergos on these, I'll probably do a full review since I've owned one, but the ergos aren't my favorite for Spyderco, but they're workable for me. It's more of like a, I don't want to say gimmicky, but it's kind of a fun, kind of out there, cool looking, fun to play with knife. And when I'm looking for real utility, this isn't the one I reach for, primarily because the ergos. It's ground really well, and there's a lot that is going for it. But anyway, there is a Smock in here. Next we have a knife that is familiar to me, but there is one little difference. This is an H1 Salt II. Sorry, it's a Salt II in H1 steel. And if you remember, I just got a Salt II, and it happens to also be a Wharncliffe, but this one is fully serrated, which I think is kind of rad. I dig serrated blades on like kind of tool knives, like this in my opinion is. Like this is a great like tackle box knife, or for me it's for when I go kayaking or to a pool party or like stuff like that. And so I kind of dig, I'm not usually into serrations, but here I think it makes a lot of sense, and they are ridiculously sharp serrations. This is a pretty wicked looking blade, especially with that warny. Anyway, if you want to see my full review on Assault 2, that already exists. It's also a Wharncliffe, it's just plain edge, so that's the only difference there. But this one's cool that it's different too, I've found out, from the typical Delica, because that's the platform this is based on, because this becomes linerless, and so they've kind of beefed up the plastic here, and it just, I don't know, it's lighter, and I haven't held a Delica in a long time, but I think if I were to hold them side by side, I'm confident I'd like this better, the way that they do this handle. It's just really cool to me. Next, we have a Native 5. Now, you've already seen a Native 5 in this box, but it was the fluted carbon fiber S90V one like I have. This one, however, is if I was going to get a lightweight Native 5, the one I would pick. This is the Maximet one, as you could probably tell already by the scale color. But this one is the lightweight Maximet Native 5, which means that it is lighter and has probably the best steel you can get. Almost, maybe period, but in this platform for sure. Maximet is just one of my favorite steels in existence, and I feel like it makes a lot of sense on this knife. It's a really excellent steel choice. This one does feel a little bit lighter even than my carbon fiber one, I think. There's one right here, so I guess let's confirm that theory. Actually, I don't know. I don't have a scale that could measure these right now, but they are real close. Anyway, very different knives, as you can see. This one being plastic, and this one being exquisitely done carbon fiber. They're, yeah, it's worth it, I think, to have both of these in here, because I think also a lot of people would only buy one Native 5, and so to help them decide whether they want to go the lightweight route or go the Gucci route and get the really nice, expensive one, it's an excellent exercise to be able to hold them both. Now, the last knife in there is this tiny little guy. This is a Dragonfly, and it's been a long time since I've held a Dragonfly. I had a buddy who had one and carried it a lot, which is funny because it's just such a tiny little knife. But this one's in VG10. These bright orange scales are awesome. I'm not sure if this is a Cutlery Shop exclusive. It leads me to believe it is because of these just vibrant orange scales, but either way, it's a cool tiny little knife. And what always shocks me about the Dragonfly is how good it feels in hand for how tiny it is. That's what she said, but it's a really excellent small knife. Like this could almost be a keychain knife. I bet some people even do keep it on a keychain, but it's an excellent little tiny utility blade, and it'll do great for things like opening boxes and mail and all of your light duty EDC stuff. This will actually probably be very, very capable of. So that's the final knife. That's all 20. So there's going to be a few videos from me on like full reviews of some of these knives that I've owned before but don't anymore. I may use one or two of them for comparisons or something like that. I'm still trying to figure out all the videos I want to make with these before I need to send this box back out on Saturday to the next person. But I'm just really excited to be able to check all these out. What a cool thing to put all of these knives together in one place and let people check out everything from the Dragonfly to the Shaman to, I don't know, what else can I grab? There's all kinds of just very wildly different stuff. And people who are kind of getting into Spydercos or into knives in general, this is a great opportunity, if you can take part in something like this, to just be able to see what you like and find out your preferences by actually holding things, and not for like 2 seconds at a knife show or in a knife shop, but to really adequately have them for a few days and experience them. Put them in your pocket, see how they feel, see how they carry, see how they cut a little bit. Like, just a really cool idea. And I love that this actually happened. So again, kudos to Jason and Thomas from the Millie PM2 Para3 Club. And a huge thank you and shout out and great job to Jeff from Cutlery Shop for making this happen. and being the type of retailer who will actually do something like this. What a cool thing to have all these knives in one place and to allow people to experience them. So thank you so much to him. I will put some more details about the Millie PM2 Para3 Club down in the description, as well as a link to Jeff's shop, Cutlery shop, so you can check both of those out and show them some love for doing something cool like this and for letting me be one of the first few people to check it out. It's a really cool, exciting thing for me. So hopefully you enjoyed seeing all of these. If there's anything in particular that you want to see a lot more of, or that you want me to specifically highlight, then let me know in the comments. If I've got the time and ability to do it while I've got this here, then I'm happy to make videos on as many of these knives as I can. So there you have it. That'll be all 20 of the knives in the Cut Club box. So thanks for checking it out. I'm going to go ahead and get these loaded back into their slots, and I will check in with you guys very soon, I am sure.